I'm on some slow internet right now, you guys. Oh, internet, behave. Here we go. So here's what I'm thinking about doing. I'm just going to start with this palette as sort of a sketch, as loose sketch area to kind of illustrate where my head went. So after looking through a lot of reference images of these urban environments and day-to-day life, I keep on stressing to everybody, and I'm saying like, hey, let's do something that feels that has some interest to it. Let's get a story behind what it is that we're creating. I help to drive the narrative and give you an idea so that it's not just, a random cityscape that looks like the Roku background that's got just a bunch of random stuff applied to it. If we can attach some kind of story to this, or think of this as being like a clip or a cut from a film or a TV show, then our result is going to end up being a lot stronger because we've got a reason for why our characters, right? Always bringing back characters to be able to drive why they're in this space and why this is occurring, coming up with that narrative inside of your head. So the first idea that I had, and this is how ideas kind of work, right? We end up smoothing on 25, opacity, let's bring it up to 55%. And the first idea that we come up with oftentimes is just skimming the surface. That
Excuse
is,
me?
the one that's right out of the can. It's nothing too special about it. Hey, what?
Excuse me.
What's going on?
What is it called? Oh, okay.
Hey,
The window for our meeting was blocking the Photoshop thing. The window was blocking it, but I can see it now.
oh, okay, cool. Yeah, I think there might be some lag that's going on here with how Teams has evolved to be able to deal with latency or lag. Um, yeah, so Photoshop is there. Glad that's updated itself now. Um, but like I was spieling on about, and thank you for making me aware. Please jump in anytime if we have any more technical difficulties like that. I kind of want to do like a really tall shot where I'm panning either up or down. I think up is the way that I want to go. And then I started thinking to myself, this could be pretty interesting. But what if we had an initial shot over here that we travel through? So we zoom in on the initial shot. So we're going to zoom in, pan over, stop here, and then head up within my scene. Let me turn down the background opacity so you guys can see this a little bit more clearly. Or maybe I need to make it darker. Dark mode. There we go. Now you can see what I'm talking about. This looks like absolute chicken scratch. But so here is the movement that I have in mind. The idea is that I want to end my first idea, my first concept was that I want a like workers structures up on top of a skyscraper or a building crane. I kind of want to end rendering like a building crane with a bunch of pieces of steel beams or something on there, something like that. And you've got the working box over here on the side. And I can stylize this working box and the building crane to where it looks a little bit more toony, so it doesn't look like I'm doing a what you call it, a mechanical engineering rendering or like an industrial design rendering, and instead giving it a little bit more style and a little bit more panache. Okay. Yeah, man. So if we've got the building crane here on the side, that's kind of fun to do. I like building cranes. So building cranes to me represent progress and upward momentum within an urban area or within a society. I lived in China for 2 years, like a long time ago. Don't ask me to do the math. A while ago, and when I was over there, it was the first time in my life I'd really seen urban areas that were having a rejuvenization and we're having that much progress. Every city that I went to, the entire skyline within these cities was filled with these building cranes. And I've always liked to know that things are happening, that progress is occurring within the space. So I sort of like the idea of, as I zoom out on this shot, showing sort of a skyline with a ton of different building cranes on the top of it. So I want these buildings that I'm sketching out here in the background to be really, really far away, and then to have one that's being sort of constructed here in the foreground. So I'd like to do a building that they are still working on. So one that's still being built. So maybe they've just got on one side, the walls up on it, and they're working on building the walls up the edge here. I think that could be pretty interesting. Maybe they've got some windows on this side so that we can see out and we get that little parallax effect a little bit more. Or let's think. So I'm doing this in real time, you guys. I I had a very loose idea until I started talking about this out loud about what it is that I wanted to do. But what if, because of the nature of what it is that we're doing, we've got transparency and all that stuff in here as well. What if I showed like the inside of the building, and we're showing on one side, they've got a wall built. So let's wall this section up. So I have a little bit less work to do, and we can give it a nice window on the outside or some kind of like skyscraper-esque looking thing that's going on here, starting to divide that building up. And, on this side, we show the actual construction beams. So that way we get some nice negative space that we're passing behind, and you can still see the city over to the side. Could look really, really cool and really interesting. So that'll work pretty well here. One of the other neat things that you can do within this project is a lot of the reference images that you're going to see within the cities are built on either 1 or 2 point perspective. So we'll have one perspective line that comes back to here. Here's our horizon line, and then you'll have a building that's moving up and over, right? So if it's a big box, it kind of looks like this. Here's the back of the box moving on the horizon line. And then if it was able to see the shot. And then from there, the rest of those buildings kind of go down on this horizon line like so, right? I think this is going to be pretty common for the reference images as you're looking at these urban environments that you start to see. It doesn't lend itself that well to the project that we're creating right now because there's some issues that occur with this. So now that we've seen the After Effects setup for this assignment, I keep on talking about putting this stuff on hills and how I would divide up my layers if I did want to have the buildings sort of going back in a 1 point perspective shot. This saves me a lot of that trouble, my example over here, because I'm using this building on the side and the crane to sort of get a lot of that 1 point perspective. So I'm dropping something right into the foreground here that's going to cover up a big portion of my screen in a really interesting way. But be mindful of this while you're creating these compositions. If you go back like this and you're moving the camera left to right or either direction, as this starts to show up, these buildings are in a row. Okay, so that's really what we're seeing here is our cameras on a side view, and we're shooting it this way. Okay, hope that makes sense. And we're seeing a straight line of buildings. This is a top view over here. We'll leave our camera in. This is the top view of these buildings in a row. As the camera starts to move, so our camera is shooting in this direction right now. As it starts to move left and right, the camera is going to be looking at different sides of this building. So we're going to end up seeing the front of the building at first. Let's do it this way. So we'll call this camera position B. All right. If the camera starts on the right-hand side and moves to the left, camera position A, those buildings are going to get the 3D view. Our perspective point sort of disappears or moves over to the left with us. So instead, those same buildings suddenly have got a much much different perspective. I hope that makes sense. So let's say that this is we got a big window here, so we can see where the front of the building is at. And then that same window is here. Okay. And as the camera moves from position A to position B over to the left, the spacing on these buildings becomes different. I hope that you guys can imagine what it is that I'm saying. So this can be fixed and it can be handled, and this is for setting up the parallax effect. You just need to be mindful of what it is that's occurring here. So that means while you're painting this, you would need to do the front of your building as one layer. Okay, so this is layer one. That's our piece. Okay. On a separate layer, you need to paint the side of the building, moving back in perspective. So this is the side, front. Okay. And then let's say this is the side here, just so that we can see what I'm talking about in perspective. All right. So we got a front and a side for this particular building. So we'll call this building C and D. So building C and D, the only thing that we're seeing here is one plane. So building C and D are going to be drawn out in perspective on separate layers for C and D. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So to be able to create this section right here, this group of elements within Photoshop, and to get that perspective look going on with it, you need to create 4 different exportable layers and assemble them within Photoshop. Sounded confusing yet? I think so. Now, let's compound the problem even further. Within a scene like this, oftentimes you're going to have a ground plane. You're going to see a city street, maybe a crosswalk going across it. There's my crosswalk. You're probably going to have a street light or something that's hanging down there as well. That's letting people know what they can and cannot do. You might have some traffic on that street as well. And the real thing that I always end up having to solve for is the street. So the street itself is going to have the exact same issue. As we start to move over to the side, that crosswalk changes. The position of that center line changes as we're moving from left to right. We're going to be able to see more of that street that actually occurs. Now, within After Effects, we've got the X, Y, and Z. So X is always going to be left and right. X, Y is going to be up and down. And then we've got our Z axis, which is backwards and forwards within space, X, Y, and Z. So you can, within After Effects, because it's 2.5D, it's not quite true 3D, but it does have 2D elements to it. You could create, like you're doing for a gaming texture company, your city block from the top view, right? So here is my street. Here is, prospectively where the buildings are going to sit at. That's my sidewalk. It's going to continue over because the building planes are going to sit on it. We've got our other street view, lines going down the middle of the street, and the crosswalk right here. And you would end up painting within Photoshop a top view of your scene. Now, you can take this layer, export it into After Effects, and rotate it so that it sits flat. So that way, within After Effects, on the X, Y, and Z plane, so we've got X, Y is back, so X and Y. Now we're looking at it from a 3/4 view. I hope that makes sense to everybody. You could take this street shot, place it flat on the X plane, drop in your building plane, which will go right here. That's the front of the building. So if you remember, that's the one with the window with the diagonals on it. Okay. And then from there, you would set up your other shot within the Y, and now you're starting to create sort of 3D boxes as well. So you could do just a straight on shot of the sides of the building and build pseudo little boxes. However, it seems like a workable solution for it, but very quickly you're going to start to run into issues. And I can say this because I have been here before and I've hit my head against the wall with all of these issues. And there becomes a time constraint thing where once you start to set this up, you're like, okay, cool. I've got 3D boxes. I've got my city. It's working. But then as you start to move the camera, well, everything starts to feel like a cardboard cut in your head. Well, what about the curves on the sidewalk, right? The curve on the sidewalk that goes down at the crosswalk. It's got a little bit of a section here on the edge before the road actually starts. And then we've got our crosswalk lines. This curve here has a height to it. And when you create this flat over top view, you don't have the height of the curve. The edges, the sides of your buildings, even if you're cool, they are working within 3D. They don't have any kind of depth to them. So you're likely going to end up creating a doorway within your shot, and that doorway might have some depth to it. So maybe we put the door back here. It's got an awning around it. We're doing like a Brooklyn brownstone entrance right now. Maybe you want your entryway for the homes as you start to do your research to have some steps that are moving forward towards them, right? And maybe a handrail coming down. Well, when you only have a flat plane for the side of your building here, then you can't get those steps in there. You can't get the slowly. You'll start to create these paper cutouts, and you're making a insane like paper cutout crazy building sequence, and then eventually you're going to land on the idea that, oh my God, I'm not getting the result that I thought I would by doing this and going down this route. I should have just done this in 3D, textured it, and painted it myself outside of Photoshop, which, if you guys know Blender or Maya or any of those programs, you are more than welcome to do a paint job like that for this project. I've got no problem with it. It's cool with me, but it's a slippery slope. So all of this is to say that a reasonable solution for this project, let's change our color over until it's showing up pretty well, is instead of trying to do the buildings going down like this, come up with a different idea. So think about it in a different way. In the past, the way that I've done scenes like this is to create a hill. So if you create a hill, here's our hill, all right? This is our grassy hill. Let's put some flowers on it. Sunshine up in the sky. Okay, give it a cloud, and we'll give it some grass. Okay, so we got a nice grassy hill here. This hill, what you can do is you can create buildings. If you make the hill just a little more curved like this, suddenly that hill can become a street. Okay, now we can put our sidewalk in. And we can even set on this first layer our buildings. Okay, so all of this tricks the audience. You can paint everything you want on your building. They look like giant cereal boxes right now. You can do your steps, no problem. Your entryway, no problem. Steps, entryway, Do windows, beautiful windows, lots of detail within these shots. Absolutely no problem. This is the important part. So instead of doing a flat scene like we're seeing right here, where the city is totally flat, what we're doing is we're hiding the connection point for these buildings to
Excuse
the
me.
ground behind the hill.
Excuse
Yeah.
me. Could you change the color of
Uh-huh.
yeah, to something a bit darker or either like a bit lighter? I can't really see it.
I understand. How's that? That work for you?
It's still blue on my screen.
Yeah, it didn't really change.
The green showed. Um, all right. So you guys are lagging a couple seconds behind what you're seeing. I'm really sorry about that.
Oh, that
There it
makes
is. It should
sense now.
update in just a moment here. So I have darkened it up. Let's rasterize the layer. Hey, thank you for making me aware of this and slow me down also. Let me know when it starts to get all Halloweeny. So I changed the color that I'm working with to orange
Yeah, it still
and
has.
made the background even darker too. So it's going to look like the old school laser show.
Yeah, for my screen, it still
It hasn't
hasn't
updated
done
yet,
it
eh?
all.
All right,
Yeah.
cool. Thanks for letting me know. Give it just a moment. I'll let everything get caught up in green or the orange writing now or drawing instead of the blue. Just let me know. Keep pushing forward here.
It's orange for
Okay,
me
it
now.
just yeah, it just updated.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Mm. Hey, no problem. And that's a good check as well, because it lets me know that you guys are about 10 seconds behind what it is that I'm drawing on this particular internet connection and what it is that we're seeing here. But that'll allow me to be able to continue forward. So what I'm describing is in the previous shot, that scene for how we're describing the ground, right? So let's just create a new layer. This is a flat ground plane that we're trying to put within our shot. And the solution for this is to get away from the flat ground plane. And to give your scene some topology. By giving your scene some topology, this is the solution that I've come up with after running into many issues with trying to make these types of shots work in the past. This works really, really well, and it's going to be a little bit more successful for you. So what this allows you to do now is to be able to hide the connecting points of the buildings behind this stuff. So now you can zoom in, right? So we can totally zoom forward if we want. Zoom. That's going to work fine, hiding that ground connection. And we're seeing sort of the top. We'll give it a hat. So we know this is there it is. Tuxedo mask hat. The top of the hill and where our ground line is. Horizon line, but you can set that much, much further back. You can also, with this technique, pan to the left and the right, and it shouldn't give you too many more issues because again, now any buildings that I have behind, paint them in perspective they're going to hide. So you need to paint below the building line. But their base is going to hide behind this building. Just below. Okay. I would do, we'll say this is, the two buildings are building A and B. This is going to be C. So building C and D over on the other side. And you can get fancy as you want with these, right? You can give it a big old tower, a big old smokestack. You can make it a nuclear power plant if you want. Get some smoke that's coming out of there. Nuclear power plant. You can make curved structures, a dome, whatever it is. You just need to make sure that your buildings are existing below the horizon line, that you're painting down below them so that they continue forward if you move the camera up or down. And now we've got C and D that are going to be on different layers. So these would end up being really A and B can be on the same layer. Layer 1. And then building D and C, I would put that on layer 2 and layer 3. The ground layer can all be, everything that's in orange can be on one layer. And then building C and D would be on layers 2 and 3. And then from there, you're really off to the races. So now you can go in and create something. I'm going to use that bright green one more time at the very back of your shot. That becomes a big old city skyline. Just keep in mind that we need to overpaint our city skyline just a little bit because we are going to see some edges of it because we're going to be pushing it back so far. And then beyond the city skyline, what other colors do I have? You can do, even more buildings back there that have got more atmospheric perspective that are starting to occur so that they're moving at different paces and speeds, but you just need to paint behind the other one. Or, as I like to do, paint this green layer really, really large and then reverse it, scale it back, desaturate it. So flip, like mirror it over so that the sides that are hidden, it's going in opposite directions and change the color scheme up on it. So now all of a sudden we've got a shot that we can zoom in on. We'll be able to go down the street and then off towards the buildings. So you're almost like a little bird that's flying through the street here. So this is my pigeon. Let's give him a tail. And he's flying through the city. Right. So this is a really successful way to be able to handle particular shots. I'm glad we're talking about this because I feel like this is maybe cluing you guys in quite a bit more on what it is that you can do with these shots and where you might have some issues with them. Okay, so all of this business here, the problems you're going to run into when you try and do a flat ground plane within your shot. We don't want that to happen. So instead of doing a flat ground plane, doing a hill, oops, there it goes, a hill to hide that ground plane really helps an awful lot. And then if you wanted to the car or the person to be jogging, then the ground plane exits through the front of the scene, you create another hill on the other side. And you never really get to see them level out, and the ground plane never really becomes flat. It is a workable approach to be able to get this to work, and it can help you. So all that is bringing us back to, I would upload like this PSD, but I don't think anyone looking at this without this video is kind of the rubric. or the codex could understand what the heck those chicken scratches are. Is what I'm thinking. So I want to do a shot of a city with cranes up on top of it. So here's my city line back here, some other buildings, and I want to have lots of building crane in this cityscape. That's going to be the story that I'm telling. And then I want the construction workers to be sort of animated and milling about, one of those like 1920s industrial revolutions where they're like building the super high skyscrapers and the guys are just walking around out there on the exposed beams. They used to do Looney Tunes cartoons, that stuff all the time because it's just so visually stunning and captured the audiences or the American public's attention. Remarkable. So I'm going to hide the left side of my scene all the way down. Let's make it really, really high up for where we begin with this shot. So with that, I've got some options for how I can move my shot over to the side. I think it'd be kind of cool at first to do it like from a rooftop and to tell the story of like what's going on inside of the rooftop. Everyone has like their clothes out to dry. So we're kind of telling the story of like who this person is or what it is that they do for work by the clothes that they're hanging up. They've still got their washer, or at least the laundry. No, this is modern times. So we want a modern kind of clothing hamper, even though they're still drying their clothes, the old-fashioned way. A lot of places in the world, they still prefer to do this because it gives it a nice fresh smell. And we can do a cool little modern roof city top. I think that's kind of a neat way to be able to begin this. Maybe we've got a chimney that we design and we say modern space by including like an air conditioning unit for the building up on top as well, and get some wires running across this building spaces also. Maybe put an old satellite dish that no one's really using anymore up on the top also. Okay, so that works pretty good for telling the story of the space. What else could someone do? Maybe I know that when I lived in Brooklyn, New York, we used to go up to the rooftop all the time and look over across the river at Manhattan and smoke cigarettes up on top of the roof. So maybe there's, a chair or something else that someone has kind of got set up out here for living. So we'll do like a sun chair or something that's just sort of chilling out over here, living up on top of the city. I've decided the next time I do the 1940s and 50s project that I totally want to make it a winter scene. I haven't done too many examples of winter wonderlands, and winter scenes always seem to trip people up if you've never done one before, understanding what the twist is. I'm trying to get something pretty cool here.
Question,
It's going the
Professor.
right way.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Are you moving your cursor and
Yeah,
like
sure can.
making new strokes and making new shapes and stuff?
I'm drawing, yeah.
Okay, so the only thing that I can see on my screen right now is just the red rectangle with like a few like buildings in the midst, but it's been like that for the past like few minutes and it hasn't really changed. So I was wondering if you were just talking or actually making strokes.
Ooh. Yeah, I'm making strokes. So thank you very much. I know that, and thanks for paying attention to this and making me aware. What I'm going to do now is I think we've got enough for this particular video. I'm going to stop recording.